Imagine a tiny island. No oil, no gold, no vast farmland, no natural resources. In fact, when Singapore became independent in 1965, many experts believed it had almost no chance of surviving. Yet today, this small country has become one of the richest places on Earth. Its citizens are wealthier than most Europeans. Its airport is ranked among the world's best. And global giants from Google to Apple have made it their Asian headquarters. So here's the question. How did a country that seemingly had nothing become one of the richest nations in human history? The answer is far more surprising than you think. Let's go back to 1965. Singapore wasn't supposed to succeed. The country had just been expelled from Malaysia. It had no natural resources. Its population was divided among different ethnic groups. Unemployment was high. Housing was poor. Fresh water even had to be imported from a neighboring country. To make matters worse, Singapore sat in a dangerous neighborhood during the Cold War. Many newly independent nations around the world were struggling with corruption, instability, and poverty. Singapore looked destined to join them. When the country's founding Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, announced independence, he was visibly emotional, because even he wasn't sure whether Singapore could survive. So how does a tiny island with no resources become richer than countries blessed with oil, minerals, and vast land? The answer starts with one crucial realization. Singapore's leaders understood something most countries ignored. The greatest resource isn't what's under the ground. It's what's inside people's minds. Singapore sits at one of the most important locations on Earth. For centuries, ships traveling between Asia, Europe, and the Middle East passed through nearby waters. This gave Singapore one advantage: location. But location alone doesn't create wealth. Many countries sit in strategic positions and remain poor. Singapore needed something more. So its leaders made a radical decision. If they couldn't sell natural resources, they would become the place where the entire world wanted to do business. First, they attacked corruption, and they did it aggressively. Government officials were paid competitive salaries. Anti-corruption agencies were given real power. Even high-ranking politicians could be investigated. The message was simple. If you're doing business in Singapore, the rules will be clear. That immediately attracted foreign investors. Then came infrastructure. Singapore invested heavily in ports, roads, airports, and public housing. While many countries debated plans, Singapore built. Fast. The port of Singapore soon became one of the busiest on the planet. Containers from every continent flowed through the island. Trade exploded. But Singapore wasn't finished. The government understood that factories and shipping alone wouldn't guarantee long-term prosperity. So they focused on education. Massive investments were poured into schools, universities, and technical training. The goal wasn't just literacy. The goal was creating one of the world's most skilled workforces. And it worked. Global companies began opening factories and offices across Singapore. Electronics firms arrived. Chemical companies arrived. Banks arrived. Technology companies arrived. Each wave brought more jobs, more skills, more investment. Then Singapore made another smart move. Instead of choosing between capitalism and government planning, it used both. Markets were encouraged. Businesses were welcomed. But the government remained deeply involved in long-term planning, housing, transport, economic development, talent attraction. Everything was coordinated around a single objective: make Singapore indispensable to the global economy. And gradually, it became exactly that. By the 1990s, Singapore had transformed from a struggling port city into a global financial center. Money flowed through its banks. Goods flowed through its ports. People flowed through its airports. The island had become one of the world's most important economic crossroads. But here's the most remarkable part. Singapore achieved all this without discovering a single barrel of oil, without a gold rush, without vast natural wealth. Instead, it built wealth through strategy. So why exactly is Singapore so rich? There are 5 major reasons. Reason 1. Location. Singapore sits on one of the world's busiest trade routes. A huge percentage of global shipping passes nearby. This makes it a natural hub for trade and logistics. Reason 2. Clean government corruption creates uncertainty. Businesses hate uncertainty. Singapore built a reputation for transparency and rule of law. Companies knew contracts would be enforced. Investors knew their money was relatively safe. Reason 3. World-class infrastructure. The country invested heavily in ports, airports, transportation, and digital infrastructure. This made business faster, cheaper, and more efficient. Reason 4. Human capital. Singapore turned education into a national priority. Since it lacked natural resources, skilled workers became its most valuable asset. In many ways, people became Singapore's oil. Reason 5. Long-term thinking. Perhaps most importantly, Singapore consistently planned decades ahead. Instead of focusing on the next election cycle, leaders often focused on the next generation. The result was stable policies that encouraged investment and growth. When you combine all 5 factors, you get something incredibly rare: